And so I'm here with my partner in crime and colleague and co-host on the Accounting Influencers podcast for this special guest interview. It's the wonderful Martin Bissett. Good day to you, sir.
Good day to you, Rob. I am all of those things, aren't I?
You're all of those. You're the guru. You're the cliche, Martin. Oof. You've graced so many stages and you've been that go-to expert for so many years. And it's good to do a deep dive with you on a few things now, rather than the occasional little rants and news updates and here's what works. So are you ready for that?
Oh, I'm ready for that. Good, but don't call me not a guru. Guru, no. Cliche, yes, but not guru. That's for sure.
Indeed.
No, it is weird to be on the other side of the desk this time and be the subject rather than the interrogator. So, yep, I'm ready to go, Rob. You fire ahead.
And it is a strange one, isn't it? Because you've appeared on many podcasts and been asked things, Martin. Likewise, I appear on a number of podcasts to talk about various topics like talent and succession and business development and growth for accounting firms. So we've got expertise in our own right that people don't often see and hear about in the Accounting Influencers podcast. So it's a chance for you to shine a little bit more.
My goodness, I've waited my whole life for this moment. This is going to be exciting.
Well, let's just start off. For the benefit of people that don't properly know what you do, just give them a 30-second background, Martin, of what you've been doing for 24 years in the accounting and fintech world.
So a 24-year veteran of working in the profession, but not being of the profession. So I'm not a qualified accountant and I never will be. But I have had perhaps more exposure than most to what is said and thought about in a managing partner's office at 8 o'clock at night once the staff have gone home, and all the concerns, political, operational, and growth-related of accounting firms throughout the world. In fact, 44 different countries in total, and 6 of the 7 continents as well. So I like to think that I bring, first of all, one of the few independent perspectives to the table, and also one that is perhaps more qualified by experience than a lot of the voices that are out there. So it's it's all about track record for me. Developed as a director of somebody else's organization, delivering lead gen for accountants, graduated to my own organization of being a consultant, speaker, author, internet marketing cliche, and then developed from 2018 onwards assets for the accounting profession. So here I am today as the owner or co-owner of several assets serving the profession, all designed to deliver the mission of bringing financial literacy to business owners via the accountants, because it's the accountants that have the financial intimacy with the business owner.
Nicely said, but way more than 30 seconds.
Sorry about
that. That's okay. So you've got longevity in this game. You've seen a certain amount of change. I won't say a lot of change over the years because the accounting profession is not known for its ability to change, but talk to us about the generations that you've often mentioned to me privately, about these waves of accountants that have come through and what that looks like to the outside or even someone in the profession.
Yeah, I did a video a while back called Generation 3, and the point of the video was, will this be the generation that gets its finger out?
Yeah.
And what I meant by that, typically, provoking as usual, but what I meant by that is that I sat in all these offices that I talked about, all these managing partners' offices, and listened to plans and dreams and goals, and we're going to do this next year and so on. And I've seen 2 generations now, Rob, of managing partners or sole practitioners retire having achieved nothing that they said they were going to. So basically their career can be summed up like this. They worked too many hours for too little money, got enough in the pension and left. And that's a sum total of somebody's professional life. And anybody listening to this, I would hope would push back and say, but what about all the clients? What about all the stories? Well, yeah, that's exactly right. Those people did help a huge number of businesses. They have got a lot of stories, and exactly none of them are recorded for posterity. So we don't know about them. So what was the point in them happening? So what I see now is I see a generation of accountants who've been trained the same as all the rest, but have a different level of aspiration. So rather than I'll work 25 years up the firm, become a partner, and then become rich, and then that's me sorted, I have a different level of aspirations where the vision or mission of an accounting firm that they work for actually matters to them. It's actually part of the decision-making behavior. A commercial desire exists to understand how to run a business, not be an accountant in accounting practice. There is a much greater grip on technology than there was in generations gone by, where there was a resistance to change in technology. So I see a difference now. I see a younger, hungrier, more open-minded, more ambitious, and more diverse accounting cohort, shall we say, than I've seen in generations gone by. We're not just talking about 55-year-old fat white rich people anymore.
Mm. But is that symptomatic of the evolution of the profession and how they've adapted to change and become more commercial? Or is that symptomatic of generations generally, the millennials, the Gen Zs? They are more like that. They do push back a lot more. They do have hopefully better critical thinking skills. They won't just be chained to a desk for 10 to 15 years and expect to make partner. They want more and they want to give more.
Two things. I think it's the latter. I think it's far more generational, behavioral difference.
Yeah.
But the other thing that it is that you didn't mention there is that university has become more available to more people and more social economic subsets over the last 25 years, which has brought a different mix of people into the profession and qualified far more female leaders, far more minority professionals and so on, who have shown their abilities then in practice and been promoted or built their own firms accordingly. So I think it's a mixture of a generational change and also the further education being available and being seen as achievable and desirable by far more than the normal, perhaps, again, middle class of England that we've seen previously, or in the middle class of the US or anywhere. So I don't think accountancy is necessarily a middle class game anymore. And I think practice technology has allowed people to become far more, I'm going to say, digital in their thinking. So it's broken geographical boundaries. You don't have a client base that's within 25 miles of your office anymore. It's changed the way pricing works. It's changed the way interaction with the client works. And as a result, you've got different people delivering it on that basis. The typical, traditional words that we use, accounting firm, perhaps is less prevalent these days than it was certainly when I first came in.
But going back to the accounting qualification that you touched on, that's not changed much. Double entry bookkeeping is double entry bookkeeping. We could almost ask, is that fit for purpose? Because if nothing's changed, you're churning out the same kind of accountants with the same kind of qualifications and the same kind of thinking into a world that has changed drastically from what it was 30, 50, 100 years ago.
Absolutely. It depends on the purpose. If the purpose is to prepare someone to work into a cubicle for 30 years, it is fit for purpose.
Yeah.
But it doesn't teach commercial awareness. It doesn't teach business development. It doesn't teach marketing, all of which have become far more forefront skills in the 21st century practice. So does it build a commercial business owner that happens to be in the accounting profession? No, the qualifications don't do that. They're a technical qualification. They show you how to do the job. And as such, it hasn't changed much. And it's only fit for purpose if your intention is to simply practice the profession of accounting your entire career. If you want to build a business, that's a different set of skills.
We've touched in previous podcasts on the problem with the labor shortage in the accounting and finance profession. We've talked about the baby boomers retiring, the older people moving on, less people coming into the profession. So whilst there may be different kinds of new generational accountants coming through, there are certainly less of them. Is a trend over the generations you've seen that accountancy is less attractive to people coming in than it perhaps once was?
No, the talent shortage has been going on forever.
Okay.
I remember talking about talent shortages over 15 years ago. And there's two major factors for that. There's a difference to be made. There's a distinguishment to be made between being able to hire someone and be able to hire someone who's any good. You know, those two things are different. And I think just about any business would tell you that it's not difficult to find people, it's difficult to find good people,
right?
According to that criteria. So I think that's the first thing. And I think the other thing was that certainly in the case of university graduates, the big four in any given territory have always cast a big fishing net and sweeps everybody up long before a mid-sized practice would get anywhere near knowing about them, and then spat out the ones they don't like and kept the ones that they wanted. Therefore, the labour market becomes the ones that the big four didn't want or wasn't a fit for the big four. So I think there's that to consider. The other thing I think I would consider is that the recruitment processes and behaviors of accounting firms haven't changed. So if you're going fishing in a dead pool, then the next time you go fishing in that pool, it'll still be dead. And as such, they haven't changed how they go about attracting talent significantly. So an advert goes in a particular paper or on a particular website, or they ask the staff again whether they've got any friends or family that should join the firm. And I don't see too many firms having a diverse approach. Something that I always did in my consulting career was asked accounting firms to run a pipeline of people, just like you run a pipeline of prospects. So you have a pipeline of prospects so you know where the new business is coming from. Well, how about a pipeline of relationships so you know where the people are coming from?
Yes.
Okay, they're not ready to join you now. What about next year? What about the year after? Okay, they're happy where they are now. What about next year? What about the year after? And again, commercially, organizationally, firms were never that bothered or that well geared up to go, yeah, that's right. We'll actually run a database of people. So we'll build our people CRM, and we'll know which people are around. We'll know who's qualified over there. We'll know who's unhappy. We'll know who's moved into the area and just taken a job over there. Because accountants aren't necessarily extroverts. They're introverts who don't normally build relationships and networks like that. So it was very difficult for them to have a network like that. But for me, what causes the talent shortage? Well, it's those things we mentioned, plus the lack of innovation in recruitment techniques by the firms themselves.
Well, when we talk about innovation, the word change does come up. We've seen no change really in the accounting qualifications, the process to become a qualified professional in this game. Have accounting firms changed much? Their business models, their approach, the things that they do and the ways that they do them?
Again, it comes down to definition of terms. Change can also mean for the worse.
Yes.
And we've assumed for the better in the question. So have accounting firms improved? Yes. Is it marginal? Yes. Is it normally mandated by legislative changes? Yes. Is there a lot of proactive change where firms gone, we're not prepared to deal with this anymore, we're going to make a change, and it's going to be better next year? Not tremendously, not en masse, no. You find them in pockets, of course. There's a firm, there are firms that take a great initiative to say we're going to stand ourselves out from the rest of the crowd, but you don't see it as a norm, of course. So for me, has there been improvement? Has there been change? Well, yes, there's been change. I'll tell you what, the one thing hasn't changed, and that's the average fee that accounting firm gets for compliance work. That's been static regardless of inflation over the years from many, many firms. They are charging the same business 1,800 of their currency, $1,800 or pounds or euros or whatever now, and they were charging 1,800 5 years ago as well. So that hasn't changed. But I think technology has changed. We know that for sure. Technology has changed. And the thing that really got me in the first COVID lockdown, Rob, was the common refrain that we heard from accountants where they say, oh, we're so much closer to our clients now. We know what they're all about. We know what they're trying to achieve. We understand their business. And they were promoting that as a positive, trumpeting that as a positive. And I was thinking to myself, so does that mean that before this global pandemic, you didn't know what your clients did, you didn't know what they wanted, and you didn't understand the business? So that's changed, but that took a global pandemic to do.
Well, why hasn't there been change? If you look at other industries or sectors, technology, making cars, restaurants have changed, bars and clubs have changed, the leisure industry's changed. I could pick out any number of sectors here. Professional services, maybe even the legal market, the consulting market has changed in its approach. But is it a complacency around the monthly recurring revenues that elegantly turn up every month? What is it that is stopping the accountants from any kind of radical change?
Well, it's partly that, yeah. I mean, if you look at the drivers for change in an accounting firm, what would be the drivers for change? One would be intense competition. But there isn't intense competition. There's a lot of accounting firms, but there's a lot of businesses, and they're extremely loyal.
Right.
You don't generally change your accountant unless you really want to. You don't do it on a whim. You don't do it the first time something goes wrong, the first time they drop the ball. You stick around because they know a lot about you. So competition, while it's a factor, it's not top of the list. So it's not the competition that necessarily drives change significantly. Is it apathy? Well, there's a big argument for that. Because as you say, lifestyle goals are reached by firm owners by recurring fees. So yes, it can be that, but absolutely. We then look at, okay, so apathy, yes, because of the recurring fee model. Competition, not so much. Legislative change, that's the other thing that would drive change. When there is a law change. Now, there have been lots of law changes, but that generally creates a stimulus package for accountants. It generally gives them more work to do because there's more things the clients have to do to be compliant. So because the government and any changes in law typically help the accountant, because recurring fees come in and there's very high retention rates of clients year in, year out, and because competition from other firms isn't necessarily fierce, that's why nothing really changes.
If you look at some of the big areas that haven't changed, you touched on the average fee is very similar. We would put pricing in there, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
We would put maybe culture, maybe the accounting firm website has not changed in the last 10, 20 years. The marketing, the way they present themselves. Talk to us about some of these things that have remained largely static.
Well, if we pick up on the website, you find trends. Somebody comes up with it, some guru, back when gurus ruled the world, some guru would say something, some firm would back it up, and then it became a trend. So I remember when the term business advisors first became like a buzzword.
There you go.
So all of a sudden, all websites changed from so-and-so chartered accountants to so-and-so chartered accountants and business advisors. And then some firms went absolutely crazy, rather, and went business advisors and chartered accountants. And then, the gloves came off at that point. That was incredible. And then there was this quirky phase where we took American, Australian initiatives and influences. And we said, hey, it's not a receptionist, it's a director of first impressions. This person is our chief wow officer. And moronic things like that any clear-thinking business owner sees right through and is not swayed by in any way whatsoever. And it's just like, whatever, lipstick on a pig, as it were, as the phrase goes. So they've tried all those things, but it's all surface level stuff. You come in and you get a drink at reception, woo! But what's going on in the back room? Well, tax department's still miserable. Audit department still doesn't talk to them or trust them. Nothing changes. All the shirts are still grey. The ties have come off and it's now open neck. Wow. But very little has changed. The wallpaper hasn't changed. So various initiatives have come into the profession, starting with the boot camp, AVM being the masterclass here in the UK, ran one in the US, Rootworks in the US, Rainmaker in the US, Growth Partnership in the US. All these ways have come forward to try and get a firm to think differently, act differently, behave differently. The leopard doesn't change its spots too much unless it's made to.
And you talk often about things like value pricing that are new initiatives and great opportunities for accountants, but you often say that nothing's changed in pricing. Ron Baker, the godfather, if you like, of the pricing conversation in the accounting world, has been saying the same things for many years with respect to him because of the lack of implementation of these new initiatives.
Ron's an exceptionally sharp intellect, and he has written the cutting edge on these topics in terms of books. You ask accountants who's heard of Ron Baker, and a lot of people have heard of Ron Baker. You ask them what Ron Baker writes about, and they'll tell you exactly what Ron Baker writes about. You ask them if they've got the Ron Baker book, any one of them, Implementing Value Pricing or whatever it happens to be, or Firm of the Future or so on, they've got the book. You ask them if they've read it.
Or done anything with it.
Well, they haven't read it, so they can't do anything with it.
No.
It never gets to that point. Haven't read it, sat there on the bookshelf with all the rest of them. Never looked at. Why? Because change isn't an imperative. So generally, when it comes to pricing, if we look at pricing next, why hasn't pricing changed? Well, because of self-esteem predominantly. That little voice in the mind says, the client will never pay it. There's no evidence for that. There's no statistical evidence. But that's what the lack of self-esteem says. Lack of self-esteem also says, you're not worth that. And we believe it. So pricing increases very rarely. Again, I'm talking generally, not specifically. So don't write in listeners to say, well, I changed my prices. Yeah, I know you did. The rest of them didn't. Okay. Pricing doesn't generally change, not because the market won't stand it, or not because the market rejects it, or not because the market have looked at it, thought about it, and are not sure about it. But the accountant has never taken it to market in the first place because they're scared that the client will say, that's a disgrace, you're ripping me off, I'm leaving. But then just go look at a firm's retention rate. 90%, 95%, they don't leave. That's not what they do, generally speaking. So pricing will only increase when the accountant decides that they're worth it. The accountant will only decide that they're worth it when they start to collect and publish and promote stories of the profound impact they've had in business owners' lives.
Yeah.
The firms that do that start to recognize their own value and start to increase their prices.
Something else that hasn't changed is the accounting firm business model. The hierarchical structure, equity, partners taking the value out of the firm. Why is that?
What another part of that is what members, what accountants could and couldn't do. If you were a member of ICAW or certain US institutions, up until November 2001, you couldn't market on very many things. You could advertise and say, we exist and we're over here, but you couldn't say why you might want to go and talk to us on that basis. So it was very, very difficult for a firm to innovate up until 20 years ago. It was very difficult for a firm to educate a market up until 20 years ago. And because that 20 years gap is relatively new, and because the owners of accounting firms today weren't trained or understood how to market, how to sell, or to be commercial in that regard, and because recurring fees meet the requirements of many firm owners who aren't all that ambitious. They don't want to have an empire. They want to have a business working for themselves. That's why things don't change. Because again, the market isn't asking for anything new. The accounting firm owners don't know how to provide anything new. And they get money, whether they work at 100 miles an hour or 50 miles an hour, it doesn't change. So there is very, very little incentive for anything to change. There's no economic imperative for change. And as a result, the business model stays the same.
So as we draw to a close, listeners will be thinking about what seems to be a cynical view of the profession, but I know you love it dearly and you are very passionate about changing it where you can. So give us some hope as we draw to an end here with some predictions or what you would like to see happen as we emerge from COVID and hopefully get back to something like we did before, where the accountant held sway with the business owner.
This relatively new phenomena of venture capital or private equity funds coming in and funding the acquisition of accounting firms is wonderful.
Is that a game changer?
It's a game improver.
Okay.
And the reason why it's good is that it forces firms to be commercial. And when you force a firm to be commercial, then you have to go out and tell your story. When you have to go out and tell your story, you don't have to rely in an accounting firm on hype and false claims. You can legitimately delve into the treasure chest of your client stories and bring out the most wonderful, the most true, the most accurate examples of improvement in a business owner's life. And so many people, Rob, say to me, I got into accounting to help people. And I've ended up becoming compliance slaves and nothing more than that. Well, commercialization of the profession, which is my little trademark phrase for 2022, that's what's going to happen. When you commercialize an accounting firm and turn it into an accounting business, and Will Farnell talks about the difference between an accounting practice and an accounting business. When you become an accounting business, you become like every other business that just so happens to be in the market of accounting. But the beauty is that you've got something of genuine, true, intrinsic value to offer that really does specifically, demonstrably improve human beings' lives. And you can show it. You can show how you take the headaches away. You can show how you make the dream holiday come true, how you made the dream house come true, how you made the business empire expansion plan come true, how you dug someone out of a hole, how you stop the marriage from breaking up. All of these outcomes are accounting related outcomes. financial literacy related outcomes.
Yeah.
And with more money coming into, that sounded northern, didn't it? With more money coming into the accounting profession, more money will be spent on marketing, which means education, which means message and storytelling, which means we're going to find out as a business owner community just how incredible and unique this accounting profession really is.
Well, Martin, it's so fascinating to hear you talk about your passion for the profession. You've served it faithfully over many years, and you've got a few still to go. What would be your parting words as a postcard to the profession, if you like, to give them some sagely words of advice and encouragement for the, let's face it, probably a tough year coming up?
Give yourself some credit and then get out of your own way. And what I mean by that is that I would love for every accountant listening to this to review their career and their firm's career. And if you're brand new to accounting, if you're in first, second year qualified, look at your firm and look at what they've done. And if you're an experienced veteran, look at what you've done and start to recall exactly what you've done for people. They happen to be clients, but it's still people. And I would celebrate this year end and celebrate yourself by giving yourself the gift of validation. You're good. You're really good, but you refuse to acknowledge it and you refuse to broadcast it. So let's take some time to actually celebrate the hard work. You worked hard to get your qualification, but then you delivered on it. Let's celebrate you. And then let's understand that all of these reservations and fears and scarcity mentalities and conservative outlooks that you've got are stopping you from realizing your full potential.
It's such a strong message to end with. And that's why on the podcast, we've been focusing on mental resilience and self-confidence and affirmation and building your reputation, getting your mindset right so that you can truly serve the clients and have a fulfilling career.
Yes. I mean, I've been speaking in generalities throughout this entire segment here. And I'm sure there's listeners going, no, that's not right. I'm different. And you may be, maybe you are, but your colleagues aren't. Really, to speak to a whole audience, to speak en masse, to speak in generalities, you're not. You will not allow yourself to be as successful as you could be. And I would like to see a lot more ambition, a lot more verve, a lot more guts, a lot more chutzpah from the accounting profession to really impact business owners' lives and reap the rewards as a result.
Well, let's raise a glass to that. That's a great toast. Martin Bissett, thanks so much for your time and your inspiration today. That's been great.
Thank you, Rob.
You've been watching or listening to the Accounting Influencers podcast featuring hosts Rob Brown and Martin Bissett with key interviews, what's working in the accounting profession, and news from the accounting and fintech world that helps you do your jobs better. We go out to 144 countries, over 20,000 unique listeners with 100,000 downloads, and it is accredited for continued professional education and development. Thank you for tuning in.